Hello there. I'm going to talk to you today about obedience and disobedience, or conformity and non-conformity. But I prefer the words obedience and disobedience because they still have the moral meaning there, rather than conformity and non-conformity. It seems that the moral obligation has been taken out of it. And I'm going to talk about Erich Fromm. Hopefully many of you know of him. He's a philosopher 1900 to 1980. I am familiar with many of his works. I'm going to deal with, oh no, this is the wrong one. Sorry. He's got many books, and he's got many lectures given in the 1960s and 70s in America, and also lots of interviews and so on. And I have been reading him and going back to him, and I tell you why in a second. And so I have been binging on Erich Fromm, and thought that perhaps I should bring to you a sort of a compendium or a summary of his, well, that is impossible. I was going to say of his work, but just the main ideas that he has. So this is what I want to emphasize, that what I'm going to talk about is not my own original thoughts at all. I'm simply stating what he has said in his books and his many lectures. Why have I chosen Erich Fromm in this particular case? Because I don't want to go back to it, but I'm still struggling with understanding what is going on in the Middle East at the moment. Okay, and as I told you in previous videos, it's not so much the acts of government, the Israeli government. It's not so much the governments. What actually is catching my attention more, as I said, is on the Israeli citizens that are 100%, it seems, or 99.9% in favor of what is happening and in the way it is happening. And that is what I am struggling to understand. And in order to understand this, in order to understand how there can be people starving to death, okay, and there are all those trucks, in line waiting forever, 50 trucks, and they are not really letting. And if one goes in, then this is my struggle. The one that is allowed in then is blocked by Israeli citizens, not allowing it to do what they're there to do, and that is my difficulty in understanding. Now, the easy thing is to say, well, they're being used by the government so that the government can say officially, yes, we are allowing the trucks, and it's just these people, they are protesting, whatever. But that is too simple. In any case, the citizens are there blocking the few crumbs that are coming in. So that is my difficulty. So I thought, okay, where can I go to see if I can find some answers? Because I'm struggling to understand it. So one of the philosophers I found that I could go back to is Erich Fromm. He's a philosopher, but he's really a psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, who, I'll tell you just a few things about him. He wrote extensively many books: The Fear of Freedom, The Art of Being, To Have or To Be, The Sane Society, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, Escape from Freedom, lots of them. Okay, he came to the United States he was born in Germany, Austria, I think. And he came to the United States in 1933. He had done his PhD in 1922 at the University of Heidelberg, and then trained in psychoanalysis at the University of Munich and at the Berlin Psychoanalytic Institute. He was, of course, in those early days of the 20th century, a disciple of Freud, but then he, like everybody else, took issue with especially his preoccupations with the unconscious drives and so on. So Freud he saw as he of course had a lot of merit, had taken the first step and so on, but then that needed to be further studied and developed. He escaped from Nazi Germany in 1933, and he taught at the University of Columbia in New York City. He also taught in Mexico, in Michigan State University, and I think he ended up at the New York University as a professor of psychiatry. And his main thing is to apply the psychoanalysis of the individual to society at large. Okay, first of all, I have to tell you that he says that he is a religious man, although he confesses that he himself does not believe in God as such, but he has no problem with him. His thing is not being anti-religious at all. So sometimes he says, well, this is God, and if you don't believe in God, then think of something there. An intelligence to which every human being has throughout the ages aspired, and there is something else beyond us. He has no problem with that. So anyway, he's going to talk about obedience and disobedience, and he starts this one particular talk with saying that first of all, human history seems to start always with an act of disobedience. He mentions Adam and Eve, for example. They disobeyed God in the Garden of Eden. He wonders whether they were fully human, because he says they were not really aware of themselves. So he puts a question mark there. But then they disobeyed. And when they disobeyed, their eyes were open. That is, they became aware of themselves. He brings in Greek mythology too. And he's going to explain why Greek mythology is important. In Greek mythology, Prometheus disobeyed the god Zeus, the god of gods, by stealing fire and giving it to men. The punishment for that, for disobeying Zeus, is that he would be tied to a rock. And Hesiod, the writer, says Prometheus, he's going to write about this conflict between Prometheus and with this conflict with Zeus, and tells the story of how between this fight between these two gods, the human race was used as a pawn in this gigantic clash of divine wills, as it were. And he begins with the birth of Prometheus and explains how he tricked Zeus. Now, this is not going to be the main thing of my video today, but just in case you're not aware of the history of the mythology of Prometheus, if you allow me, I will take just 2 or 3 minutes to tell you the myth, the story. Iapetus, led away by the girl Clymene, he was led away by her, and they laid together in the same bed. and she bore to him a child, stout-hearted, whose name was Atlas. She also brought forth Menecius of great renown, and also the devious and clever Prometheus, and also Epimetheus, who was faulty in judgment, and from the beginning was an evil for mortals who worked for their bread. Now, far-seeing Zeus struck arrogant Prometheus with his smouldering bolts and hurled him down because of his vanity and excessive pride. Atlas stands and holds the wide heaven with his head and tireless hands, through the force of necessity at the edge of the earth. And Zeus bound the devious and wily Prometheus with hard and inescapable bonds after driving a shaft through his middle, and roused up an eagle against him that used to eat his immortal liver. But all that the long-winged bird would eat during the whole day would be completely restored in equal measure during the night. Now, why was he punished? Well, you see, he tried to trick Zeus. He did trick Zeus. Well, the gods and mortals had had a quarrel, and Prometheus, with quick intelligence, divided up a great ox and set the pieces out in an attempt to deceive the mind of Zeus. For the one group in the dispute between the gods and mortals, for the one group in the dispute he placed flesh and the rich and fatty innards on the hide and wrapped them all out in the ox's paunch. For the other group he arranged with devious arts the white bones of the ox, wrapping them in white fat. Then Zeus, the father of gods and men, spoke to him. Son of Iapetus, most renowned of all lords, my fine friend, how partisan has your division of the portions has been. Thus Zeus, whose wisdom is immortal, spoke in derision. Wily Prometheus answered with a gentle smile, as if he did not know of his crafty trick. And he said, Most glorious Zeus, greatest of the gods who exist forever, choose whichever of the two that the heart in your breast urges. He spoke thus with crafty intent. But Zeus, whose wisdom is immortal, knew and was aware of the trick, and he foresaw in his heart evil for mortals, which would be accomplished. He took up in both hands the white fat, and his mind was enraged, and anger took hold of his breast. And he saw the white bones of the ox arranged with crafty art. For this reason, the races of human beings on earth burned the white bones for the immortals on the sacrificial altars. Zeus, the cloud gatherer, was greatly angered and spoke to him, saying, Son of Iapetus, my fine friend, who know thoughts that surpass those of everyone, so you have not yet forgotten your crafty arts. Thus Zeus, whose wisdom is immortal, spoke in anger. From this time on, he always remembered the deceit and did not give the power of fire out of ash trees to mortals who dwell on earth. But the noble son of Iapetus tricked him by stealing in a hollow fennel stalk the gleam of fire that is seen from afar. High thundering Zeus was stung to the depths of his being and angered in his heart as he saw among mortals the gleam of the fire seen from afar. Again, this was a little bit of an aside, but the point is that according to Greek mythology, again it is disobedience that brought in civilization to the world. There is another one which is very important, and that is what we are going to deal with today here in Obedience and Disobedience. And that is Antigone. Sophocles tells us the story of Antigone, a lady, a maiden. Her brother had rebelled against the King Creon, and King Creon treated him as a criminal. A rebel who loses is always a criminal. A rebel who wins is a statesman. Well, he was punished by King Creon, and his punishment, I won't tell you, I won't read the whole story now, but his punishment was that he would receive no burial, no proper burial. And he actually said to everyone, to all his subjects, that they would be condemned to death if they actually tried to bury him. Now, why was this burial important? Because in ancient times, as indeed today, it is important to bury the dead, because it's not just that one human being. You are actually, by a proper burial, you're actually showing respect for the dignity of that human being. And you say, well, but the human being is dead. He doesn't know whether he's been buried or not. But it goes deeper than that. It's actually the respect to the dignity of human beings, of humankind. So you do not leave the body out there to be eaten and picked on and by birds and dogs. It goes to the dignity of humanity. And so in ancient times, not to bury the dead, as today, is uncomfortable, isn't it, when we see bodies in war being left there. It was certainly in ancient times a terrible punishment to be left by, the dead body there. So Antigone, his sister, knows of it and decides, and this is the question that she has to answer to herself: shall she obey the king, the state, the emperor, the laws of the state, Caesar, or shall she obey her own moral conscience of knowing that this is wrong, against humanity? Now, the punishment for disobeying, for burying her brother, will be death. And she has a hard choice to make there. And she chooses to bury him. In other words, obeying, let's say, God here rather than Caesar, obeying her moral conscience rather than the law of the land. Okay, so now this is what we're going to talk about today. Disobedience. Oh, by the way, King Creon knew afterwards that the gods would be angry, and they sent pestilence and death and for disobeying. But okay, that's the end of the story. But disobedience, independence, rebellion, public opinion, all that, let's bring all that now to the present. The capacity to say no to power. And it's not only power, is think of power not only as Caesar, not only as the government, but also the power of public opinion, which is just as strong, not to want to go against everybody else. The fear of being different from everybody else also. We're going to deal with that. So this is what Erich Fromm is going to deal with. That he says, there are two, first of all, just to start, there are two kinds of disobedience. And he frames it in this way. On the one hand, obedience to Caesar, the state, the government, or obedience like Antigone to your own moral conscience. Yeah? So there we are. So in this, we have to look at two things. The acceptance of authority. Authority being could be public opinion also, okay? In other words, you obey, you're afraid of Father, as it were. Father will punish if you don't do what you are told. I internalize that fear of being punished, and I won't do the wrong thing. So I am obeying authority coming from outside, of whatever kind of authority, okay? But it's coming from outside. The other one, the other type of authority is the voice of conscience, let us say. The voice of God, the moral voice, the voice of life. Now, and this is sometimes based on fear, the fear of authority from outside. None of us is going to say, I obey because I am afraid. Nobody wants to admit that we are afraid, so we cover it. I obey because it is my duty. I am being a good citizen. But this can be dangerous because those in power who want you to obey may be involved sometimes in manipulation. Manipulating your sense of duty, manipulating your decency or your honesty even, and manipulating you ultimately because of your fear of being different. So with this disobedience to authority, to the outside authority, as I said, Caesar, state, public opinion, government, this disobedience, Erich Fromm says, can be rational or irrational. Let us look at rational obedience. Rational obedience is natural. The captain on a ship, the fire brigade telling you not to come. That obeying of authority is rational. Okay, the teacher telling you that 2 and 2 make 4. Okay, this is based on competence. It is not healthy to just disobey that for the sake of disobeying. That is silly and childish. Yeah. It's like saying, well, you have the authority, and just because I want to rebel against authority, I'm not going to obey. That's foolish. It's immature. Although nowadays we might be experiencing the opposite. In other words, the teacher will say, you're saying that 2 and 2 are 5. Oh, well, of course, my dear, we don't want to go against you. We don't want to offend your self-esteem or diminish it in any way and make you afraid of it. But this is not good education. It puts emphasis not on truth, not on what is, on the reality of the thing, but in puts the emphasis on an individual self-expression, as it were, and it goes really against any healthy mental development of the human mind. But that is rational authority, but there is another kind of authority, irrational authority, meaning not authority based on competence, but authority based on power, and accepted not because of our wish to know, but based on our fear of authority. Oops. My microphone is falling. Okay, so let us accept that in many cases we are governed by power, accept that governance due to fear, and both power and fear are rationalized, they're given meaning to, by using competence as a tool which makes power appear to be competent. Look at all those experts on TV rationalizing to you why you should or you should not go along with whoever the government wants you to do. It appears to be competent, and you are afraid enough, you will acknowledge competence. You will see competence where perhaps none exists, which is easier than to say to yourself that you are afraid, really. So you convince yourself that your leaders are competent. And we do have to try to know the difference between authority by true competence, the fire brigade, the captain of a ship, and authority by power, because here lies your ability to follow, to obey, or to disobey. Why? Because we have to be aware, like Antigone was, that sometimes the interests of society do not coincide. Sometimes they are opposed to the interests of God, or the interest of humanity, or the interest of your moral conscience. Let us bring in moral conscience now, human conscience. So, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is of God, yes? And let us stop pretending that if we give everything to Caesar, we are therefore giving also everything to God. That is, if you obey the government, you are following your conscience, because what you are doing is your duty. Sometimes your moral duty, Erich Fromm says, is not to obey the government. And why do we confuse the two? Because there is a great premium in obedience, in following along. If I obey, I will bear no responsibility, no accountability. In other words, it takes a burden off our shoulders, we think, if we obey. We are not totally responsible. There is a conflict here. Fromm explains it in this way. Man is confronted in the same way the moment we are born. One part of us wants the light, and the other safety and security. One part is fighting to be born, and the other is fighting to return to the womb, where everything is nice and safe and secure, complete security there. And you don't have to make decisions, you don't even have to breathe by yourselves. And he calls it the wish not to be fully born. You're still in nature, part of the tribe, part of the blood and soil, avoiding the fear of being fully born, responsible for yourself. The power of belonging to the group, the power of not being ostracized, a part of that group, part of the organization, it makes you feel at one with it. You feel only alive when you are a part of something. In other words, he says, you're not fully born. And of course we have to use poetic language here, not fully born. Because scientific words are not enough sometimes. They do not describe, they know this in psychology very well, the scientific empirical words do not express well the intensity of our feelings sometimes. Many words for the things we need, which are important to us, deeply embedded in us, we have no words. So we have to turn to religion or poetry or mythology to be able to express them. Hence, not fully born. We understand what it means. So sometimes we are frightened of freedom, frightened of being born, frightened of coming out of the womb, frightened of experiencing something new. Of course, we do talk of adventure, of taking your own initiative, of risk-taking, of the individual. We love Western movies where the one, gunman stands out and goes against everybody else. But in fact, modern man is security-minded. Perhaps that is why we like those movies so much. We are security-minded, which is an aspect of a certain fear, and increasingly so in our days. So in many cases, to be disobedient, in other words, not to follow, means to move out of that area that makes us feel secure because we belong. So the capacity to say no lies in the condition to be free, a whole man. You can only say yes meaningfully if you can say no also. If you can't say no, your yes means nothing. Loyalty means nothing. If you can't say no, if there is no choice, if there is no alternative, it is a fake yes, the voice of sheep, if you are not capable of saying no. And Fromm says that the capacity to say no is actually now disappearing from the West. And you're amazed at this. Really? I thought we had more freedom than anywhere, any other part of history. He says no. He gives examples. Education, for example. The 18th and 19th century. A child, if Johnny disobeys the rules, if he disobeys father, he'll be punished. He'll be probably spanked by father. Now that is, we no longer do that. That is not progressive. That is not democratic. There are other ways. We understand that. But Fromm says it had at least one advantage. Not all of it was absolutely bad. He says there was one advantage to this for the child, and that is that Johnny knew what the rule was. He knew he was disobeying the rule, and he knew very well that if he broke the rule, he would be punished. That was clear. But now, he says, Mother says, "Oh, Johnny, I'm sure you didn't want to do that," with a smile. Well, what can a child do? How can you rebel against a smile? Sweetness. What is the punishment now? The punishment now is the sad face of Mother. And, sometimes it would be better to endure 10 spankings than to endure the sad face of Mother, which may linger on for a while, by the way. The sad face of Mother with tears in her eyes. Johnny has disappointed her. And this is by far, Fromm says, a more efficient method of producing obedience many times and compliance than the old way. If you read Butler's The Way of All Flesh, I'm sure many of you have. In the old way, Johnny disobeying was a fight against authority, but one in which the character of the person, of the child, was also being formed. Yes, many broke down, but many also came to life in that fight. In other words, in the 18th and 19th centuries, authority was still, at that time, open, overt, explicit, open, and people had the capacity and the courage to fight it. And these many times formed the character of people. Many submitted, but many didn't. In the bureaucratic society of today, the authority is almost anonymous. There are no explicit orders many times, perhaps. But you see, there are jobs that you can lose and you can't possibly afford to lose. And there are pension plans. There are any number of things that you may lose because you have entered into a system. And your security, which you value, things can go wrong for you if you have the wrong ideas. We are seeing this very clearly now in all aspects of life, certainly in politics. Even worse, sometimes people are not even aware that they have the wrong ideas. Everyone agrees. At work, the press, everyone agrees. Sometimes we are aware that we think differently, but you know that you cannot express it. You cannot say the contrary. Sure. But many times also people are not even aware that they are under the illusion that what they think is precisely what they choose to think. That is what they believe. They believe this, they have chosen to believe this. It is them, it is they who have made the decision to think that. There is a regress here. It's like an obedience to anonymous authority by means of rules, norms, hints, prescriptions, which are presented to us not as absolute orders. If you don't do this, I'll spank you. No, but as common sense, as practicality, efficiency, public opinion, And how can you possibly fight against something which seems so reasonable? We have the experts. And I'm not talking about the experts, you know, the fire brigade or the captain of... No, the experts that we continuously see nowadays. And people continue to believe them because they were made to be convinced that ordinary people really don't know very much. The issue is too complicated for you. The average man is so convinced by this that he doesn't even know that the experts have blundered again and again and again. Look at politics, look at the First World War, look at the Second World War. The wars started on blunders, they continue with blunders, they were concluded with blunders. But the young people in the trenches continued to believe in the wisdom of the experts because it was simpler. And then they all died. I am a man only if I can think for myself, if I can judge for myself. Not impressed by the fact that someone is brainwashing me. And brainwashing does not only happen in China or in the old Soviet Union. It is not unknown in the Western world, although it may be done differently. Look at the media now. They're all saying the same thing 24/7. We don't call it brainwashing, but you know, the Chinese and the old Soviets did not call it brainwashing either. They called it the improvement of man, something. And everyone is happy until the thing explodes. Fromm continues to argue that modern man, he says, has lost the capacity of being disobedient. He lost the capacity of even recognizing authority. What matters is the good functioning of the organization of society. There is no other morality in what he calls the organization man, the age of bureaucracy. Not even evil. He's not human anymore, or he's losing his humanity. Good and evil have changed. Good and evil are both human. There is evil in me and there is evil in you, and we know, we don't need Solzhenitsyn to tell us, that we are all, given the circumstances, capable, at least capable of it. We know now. We know that now for sure. And if you are fully entrenched in the tribe, safe only in the tribe, then you will project all your evil onto the enemy. So he is the devil, and you are an angel, as it were. And what could be simpler? In other words, we project the capacity for evil in us onto the other, the opponent. So to love one's enemies, very unrealistic demand, it seemed. Almost unnatural. How can you possibly love your enemies? But look at it. Look at the meaning of it. If you feel the good and evil in yourself, when you do that, both the good and the evil, you feel the whole of humanity in yourself. And when you do that, there is no more absolute enemy. The evil in the other is also my potential evil. Of course, there will be differences, but the difference is not so great as to see the other as the devil, an absolute evil, and me as God or an angel. In these bureaucratic times, the concept of good and evil is disappearing. Evil is human, it's awful and it's bad, but it is human. But it is being transformed into something else, into a thing. So man now sees himself as a thing and relates to others as things. And when this stage is reached, we have reached beyond evil, we have reached inhumanity, which is different from evil, which is human. So the moral right and wrong, good and bad, has been now equated with the functioning of society, of the organization, and does not seem to respond humanely anymore. And so it is, for this person, it is almost impossible for him to be disobedient, because he is so much a part of the machine. It's like a cog in the machine, and can be disobedient only as much as a cog in a machine can be disobedient. And this is a serious problem. Losing our sense of individuality. Obedience and disobedience are not contrary, opposing things necessarily. If I can only, if all I am is disobedient all the time, just for the sake of being disobedient, I'm a fool. But if I'm always obedient all the time, I'm a sheep or a fool too. Every meaningful obedience implies a disobedience to something else, and vice versa. If, hold on, let me drink a glass of water here. Okay, if one builds up a life where disobedience is never experienced, then what you have is a fake obedience. The obedience of the machine, not human obedience. We have to learn to separate God and Caesar, where our loyalty is to the state or to God or humanity. Okay, let me okay, so I will finish just with this. In the Old Testament, we read that God hardened Pharaoh's heart when he was doing evil. What we might understand here is that Pharaoh was doing evil, and then his heart was hardened. In other words, beyond evil. a process of dehumanization such that you no longer know or can discern whether you're doing good or evil. A process of hardening the heart so that you end there in a state of dehumanization. And I'm wondering whether we are reaching this point in many areas. So this margin of freedom of good and evil, obeying or disobeying, is being narrowed down considerably. Perhaps not totally, perhaps we can still see, we're able to choose between life and death. But not everyone seems to be able to do so anymore. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Bye-bye.